Thank you everyone for showing up. The quote that I put on is basically saying it's way easier not to do things. So it's really is remarkable that anybody shows up to do anything. So welcome. And Erica, would you do the honor of introducing our panelists tonight?
Absolutely. We want to thank Danielle, Darvel, and Matthew for coming tonight. Let's introduce Danielle first, and you can wave to us, Danielle. We can all see you down there. As a first-year PTA president for the pre-K 8 district in the western suburbs of Chicago. I'm going to say it correctly, I hope. Merker District 60?
Close.
Marker District 60. Thank you. Having moved to this 1,400 plus student district 3 years ago from a small 400 student K through 6 school, she found her connection and community through PTA. She's dedicated to establishing the role for PTA as a bridge between parents, teachers, and the community to build connections, support, and resources for student education and success. Thank you, Danielle, for being here tonight. And I know you have a school board meeting tonight going on as well, right? So
yep.
We're going to hop off this and go right to it when we're done.
Exactly.
Darvel serves as the Thornton Fractional South High School PTSA president, parent liaison of the Parent Advisory Board, and Illinois PTA Leadership Development Director. Within TF South High School and his community, Darvel works with parents, staff, students, and community officials to help build stronger relationships through various resources within the community. Darvel has been in PTA since 2005, and in 15 years, Darvel has served 8 years in leadership positions. Because of his PTA involvement, Darvel has been appointed to several community committees and most recently reappointed for a second term for the Village of Lansing Human Relations Commission. Darvel utilizes many community and state resources to help make sure that PTA continues to have a voice everywhere for every child. Thank you, Darvel, for being here. Matthew John Rodriguez, hi Matthew, is a national PTA board member, co-chair of the Illinois Gov P20 Family and Community Engagement Committee, NAFSCE Parent Leadership Council, and the first Hispanic male Illinois PTA past president. Matthew John has been through 19 years of being part of PTA, fighting his way through the systems in place to advocate for his and every child. He has had the honor to gain absolutely amazing experiences that have shaped his life and future because of PTA. Not only learning about effective advocacy work all the way to the Hill, but how to develop relationship skills, presentation skills, running a nonprofit, among many others. Being involved in PTA is one of the best opportunities a person can have. Thank you, Matthew John. All right, Alyssa, I'll turn it back over to you.
So I will bridge with what you guys all are here because you've mentioned that there is a bridge between the PTA and the community. So I'd like to start with Darvel. Would you mind telling us about your experience with being part of the community to a great extent, how being part of the PTA led you to be part of your larger community?
Well, in short, I started with PTA when my daughter first started in kindergarten, and it was a point of, it was like a height of my volunteer work, because I first started volunteering when I was 21, and I was coaching basketball at a youth center. So it was always, a passion to just work with kids. Getting into PTA, I thought I was going to be a crossing guard, but that was one of the requirements to volunteer. You had to be a member of PTA. And I was like, okay, so fine, no problem. I'll be a crossing guard, I'm a PTA member, and go to the meetings. It was at that time where PTA was, nothing against the officers or the members at that time, but PTA was just a school-centered organization. I had no knowledge of district, region, council, state, none of that from 2005 to like 2011 or 12. So at that time, when my kids were going into junior high, a parent that who's had a son that I was coaching in soccer, she was involved with PTA on that level. and she
Which
had
level is that? I'm sorry.
she was involved with district.
Okay.
She had just been voted in as a district director. So she was familiar with my involvement with PTA, and we sat down. We had a one-on-one. Her goal was to bring me in and have me part of her district board. Um, when she explained to me about everything, and I'm like, slow down. You know, where's all this coming from? I thought PTA was just Coolidge Elementary. You know, I volunteer for room parties. I
You
get a
fundraise.
day off from work to go on a field trip. I'm cool with that. You know, you're bringing me into something that I never knew about. But it was at that level where PTA was fun because it was school orientated, and I'm involved with my kids, and I'm volunteering, to where a passion came in because I'm part of an organization that all of these years I knew nothing about. Do all of these things for kids, past bake sales and fundraisers.
So can you
So
give an example of a thing that you could do beyond sale, beyond fundraising?
the first thing that was approached to me was um, through all the explaining. I was being approached to be nominated for juvenile protection and safety director. At that time, I was involved with a resident committee in my community, dealing with the parks, with the park district. I got a new baby too, and at that time we were advocating as park district residents and stuff like that for a referendum. And through my involvement with that, another PTA parent pulled me into that. So in between that and being approached about juvenile protection and safety, I'm in school bus. I was a safety trainer. I was a school bus trainer. So everything at my life at that time was involving school safety or student safety. So it kind of played a big part in that. And the fact that I'm part of an organization that cares about the welfare and the safety of children. They have a position for juvenile protection and safety. Didn't know that. And I'm looking into different aspects of the advocacy, you know, health issues, environmental issues, reflections. When I first found out about reflections, I was just in awe. And I've been a big fan of reflections since day one, since I first learned about it. So I'm looking at all these different avenues of things that this organization are a part of in the children's lives past the classroom too. So that was a big spark. So
I
I was,
actually see both Danielle and Matthew nodding their heads, so I want to
yeah,
get their input as well. So Matthew,
I was excited
yeah,
about that. So yeah,
yeah,
go ahead. I could talk all
yeah.
day about that.
Yeah, and I love the passion. I mean, like that's all there is. It's like we're all very
Yeah.
passionate. So Matthew, can you bring up also the things that the reason why you decided to go beyond state and you went all the way to the national? It's quite a commitment. What made you join, and what was your involvement? Like, how did you get involved in it, and why you stayed it?
Well, I've been involved for a very long time. When I didn't understand, when I was a local PTA president, of the different levels as well, like Darvel had mentioned. And so my first Illinois PTA convention, I sat next to the first male national president-elect. And I told him that um, that I didn't, well, through conversation, it had come up that I didn't understand that this was beyond the club, the PTA club, and mom's club, mostly mom's club, right? Because there's not very many men involved in especially my local at that time. And so he said, "Oh no, the whole point of PTA is advocacy. Fundraising is necessary to accomplish some of the things some of our goals, but no, our whole point of being PTA and the history of PTA is advocacy, which opened up a whole new light to be able to jump on board."
So what was your first involvement in advocacy? What were you involved with? Do you remember the specific cause or?
Absolutely. Chuck Sailors, who was a previous, like I said, the first male PTA national president, had me work with President Obama's White House fatherhood initiative, and it was
That is great.
amazing. Plus, I was also able to work with Tony Dungy and All Pro Dad. He has an organization called All Pro Dads, and then General Colin and Alma Powell. They have an organization that helps dropout high schoolers to help them not only get back in school, but figure out what went wrong, how we can improve education to prevent further children from dropping out. So it's been an absolutely amazing experience that I would have known as a local PTA leader that it could even lead to something like that.
And actually, there is a PTA leader, Danielle, you mentioned earlier when we talked that you are seeing PTA way past than just fundraising and parties as well, but you're just starting at a local unit. And how do you think at the local level, can you make it inform people more? And like, what's your vision as a president right now to kind of?
It's interesting because I bring in a perspective from being involved in my PTA at my old school where we had moved from, which is just down the street, 10 minutes away, but it's a different world. I was exposed at that school to a lot of initiatives through PTA, like the Reflections program. And I think some of those national programs, which take the experience beyond the classroom and beyond just parties for a PTA. So it's beyond education, but how we can do more for the students. And I like that connection that is to the classroom, but outside of it. It enhances the work that's happening in the classroom. So I brought that into Marker. One of my key things I wanted to bring into our district was Reflections, because we'd never participated. This is our first year. We just actually had our awards ceremony last week, which was great. First year kicking it off in a virtual year. I joke. Oh, sorry, my dog. Good timing. Hold on 1 second.
What?
Sorry about that. But just bringing that to the forefront, we see the opportunity, and one of the things that was needed at Marker is that connection to one another, because we're a pretty big district relative to what I came from, and we span preschool through 8th grade and across 3 different campuses, but we're one PTA. And when we look at that, we're a PTA at our district level, how can we get this diverse group of people with students of diverse ages to do more, and looked at more than the folks that put on our cultural festival or put on our science fair or put on, field days at the end of the year, the fun stuff. I'm like, hey, what more could we do? And I'm very involved on the school board side and have been on our school board equity committee and other pieces of it. And I saw that there was a huge opportunity to bring it forward. Bring PTA into that conversation with the administration, with our district leadership team, and with our parents to understand where we could all work together and to be that bridge, because they had been operating a little siloed prior. So my goal is to bring more of that together and to use some of the national and state programs to do so.
So when you say to use the national and state programs to do so, can you give an example to somebody who doesn't, like this is your first time?
First time. I mean, honestly, one of the things I went to last year was a VP on our board, and that was, I'm like, I can't do anything more. I got to orient myself to this school and what we do, what is our PTA, what have we done before, what haven't we done before, and what we could bring forward. So we had actually, being on that board was helpful, and I went to a spring workshop held by the state, and we got introduced, and we had a bunch of us who were newer PTA members who were on the board who started to go, and we had a lot of excitement and interest, and we learned about programs. One of the programs that we learned about and I took forward with my executive board now, I have 4 VPs and secretary and treasurer. We've worked together and explored the programs like School of Excellence. School of Excellence program is something I had never heard of before. And we looked into it and we're like, well, this seems like something, it aligns with the type of organization and work we're trying to do at our district level to bridge that connection, create that connection. We're like, what's the chances of us actually being qualified as a School of Excellence? I don't know, slim to none. This is first year. However, this is a framework to allow us to, let's take the learnings from what others have done and use it as a framework for us to move forward, because otherwise we're just making it up on our own. And I think that's what a lot of local PTAs do, like you, Darvel, talking about. You think about what happened at the school. that's all you know. And everybody thinks that we don't know what we're doing. We're just kind of faking it till we make it. We do what we did and that's it. And we keep it going, but we don't have our stuff together. I think going and looking, having the perspective of coming from a different school, they thought that too. And I saw different things that my old school did better and new things that this school does better. And everybody, actually, I'm really impressed with how much we do on our own. And when you go to the state and national organization and use the tools there, we can all just really see and be impressed with the accomplishments we have and use those tools to grow more. So School of Excellence is a framework that we use to really rally around what we can do. And this year was a prime year for doing it because we had the opportunity to step away from those parties and those volunteer things that sucked the time and energy away from that focus. So I actually think in some ways this year of a challenging year of a remote learning and remote opportunity has allowed us the freedom to focus in different ways and refocus.
There is a famous quote that says, never let a good crisis go to waste. So I think you guys nailed it. You definitely made a good use of it. Matthew, I had a question of that to you, actually. So Danielle was saying that looking at different PTAs, you notice different ideas. And so going from state to national, you're now seeing people dealing with the same kind of issues, but in completely different states, and all states we're all the same country, but God, we're so different. So can you tell me how other states are handling things that maybe you've noticed that you'd like to share with others that we should know about?
Absolutely. We're all sharing information. That's number one. So that's cool. Like today was shared with me a Harvard Business Review article on onboarding new leaders remotely. So I can put that in the chat if you'd like that address. So that you guys can share that article, as well as I see the states making very intentional outreach to each of individual members in order to just not only provide the PTA resources, but provide a community of support for each other, right? So they're having, hey, let's have a mental health check-in, hour at least, so we can all dump on all the things that we're going through right now. And so that really provides the support that a lot of us parents are going through, not knowing how to help multiple children on our devices through virtual learning. Special education has a lot of challenges, as you can imagine. There's all kinds of things that are that we're seeing across the country, of new ways of people trying to keep that connection that we used to be able to have in person. Nothing replaces that personal one-on-one contact, right? But at least we're able to come together, and it's not just the opportunity of speaking about a certain event, but it's really about taking care of each other as people and as parents and teachers as well, and giving us that open space to communicate, help each other move forward.
So Darvel, you've been too quiet, and I'm going to put you on the spot. The question I had for you is regarding we've mentioned parents, and we also have mentioned the teachers, but what about the students? How could they get involved? You have a history of pulling in the kids into the system. So can you tell us about your experience? What were your tricks, and how you would recommend somebody else try to replicate that?
Well, my experience, when I first started really learning about PTSA was when my son and my daughter, they were in junior high. So my daughter was like in 7th grade, son was in 6th grade. So I started learning, getting more information about PTSA. I thought it was something like totally different, but it's still under our organization, and truly it is. On the high school level, because our junior high, we didn't have PTSA. So going into my term as a region director, that's when I started finding out that a lot of junior high or middle schools were PTSA, but majority of your high schools were PTSA. So going into 2016, 17, that's when I started doing a lot of homework on PTSA. And what was missing at Thornton Fractional South was the S in the PTSA, the students.
Would you mind saying like what it is? What's the PTA versus PTSA? Because some
well, the PTA is more of the parent involvement, parent teacher association. With PTSA, students are allowed to be members. Students are allowed to actually be a paid member, have all rights and privileges as an adult member, and they are a part of the organization that advocates for them. And at a high school level, when I first experienced it, I was vice president, and some of the students at our high school, we had no student members at all, and the students had organized the walkout, the march out, and it sparked then that every student is not an athlete, every student is not a musician or in the choir or something like that, but they are a part of something in the school that strikes on all points of what we advocate for, from environmental issues to reflections and cultural arts to health issues and legislative issues. So I made it a promise that as I started gathering information and I started, weeding out and picking out, coming in as president, I say my first goal is to target students to join PTSA at Thornton Fractional South. And I target those students that were involved in certain aspects of what we advocate for. So my first students that I target for were the ones that were involved in the walkout. I was impressed about how they came about trying to organize it. They met with themselves first, but in today's world, we have more mature high school adults, and they're more they're more opinionated on current events, things that affect them in the community and abroad. So I targeted the ones that were the organizers of the march out, and they had went to the board. They sat down with the school board. The school board welcomed them with open arms because of their platform and how they wanted to organize it. And they took it from there. So I target those students first. And then my second target was the students that are into cultural arts. We have some amazing writers, poets at our school, artists, and I targeted them to join PTSA. Hey, we got a reflections program. You can expand your art past the district school, the art fair. And they were excited about it. One of the first questions that they asked was, this is a volunteer organization? Yes, it is. Good. I can get some volunteer hours. You sure can, because I got a lot of work for you to do, and I would be glad to sign off for your volunteer hours. In that volunteering, they got passionate about what they were doing, from food drives to the concession stands. They saw friends and they would come up, oh, you work in concessions? Yeah, Mr. Stinson got me this gig, okay, fine. So it started inspiring a few students that wanted to be involved with it, help us out at football games and stuff like that. But like I said, I targeted students that were not athletic, wasn't choir inquired, they can sing in the choir or musically inclined. And I got those students and brought them in and explained to them what we are about, the things that we advocate for, and it reached their passion that they were doing outside of PTA, and they brought that into the organization. I had some that joined and their parents showed up at a meeting, and I'm the parent of so-and-so, so-and-so. I didn't know that they was a part of this. How can I join?
That's clever. So get the kids first, and then you get the parents to join.
You get the kid, you get the parent. Idea. And my catchphrase was, if my son comes home at 8:00 at night, and I know he should have been home at 4, and I say, well, where have you been? Oh, I was at a PTSA meeting. Yeah, right. When's the next one? Because I want to go. I want to make sure that, first of all, that's where my son was at. And second, if that's where he was at or my daughter was at, 100 things can be said in that meeting, but one thing is going to spark that parent because it inspired their child. It inspired them to want to be a part of that organization. I had some parents that were regulars that were joining that I saw from growing up, that were in the elementary school and the middle schools. And they were like, oh, I'm glad there's a PTA here. I'm like, yeah, why wouldn't it be? They was like, well, nothing was talked about on the high school level. So I got them in and they wanted their students to be in because they found out students can be members. So it prior to COVID, it was a great takeoff. It was working well. Had a nice little group of students that were doing well in it. There are some that are still around in the community, helping out, you know, advocating, doing food drives, a whole bunch of volunteer stuff. But their pride is that I'm a PTSA member at my school.
And I feel like the PTA is an excellent platform for kids to learn, to get their wings, to deal with the really, really messed up issues that they're faced with.
Absolutely.
The issues that surfaced this year, but obviously were there the entire time. And Matthew, do you want to talk about the initiatives that are regarding the legislation for the juvenile justice that has been going on at the national level? The kind of initiatives that have been taken to just, because that seems to be the draw for a lot of younger people to the PTA that would be willing to join.
Well, we have a lot of initiatives for our youth. We have a whole entire youth committee, and they take up what they're passionate about and take that directly to the Hill and then spread that out, hopefully down to the local level, to show what their initiatives are for the year. So they determine that.
Can you unpack that? So when you say they take it to the Hill, what does it really mean? Like how do they get organized, and what does that look like? Because
well, the youth member committee submits, just like every other committee, their initiative for the term that they're going to serve. And then they look for buy-in from other youth members throughout the country, different states, to help them and join them. And then they go to Washington, D.C., they go to see the legislators to advocate with their own voice on what's important to them and how their future and the things that impact them can be solved or resolved by our legislators. And the legislators absolutely love to hear from the students themselves, especially like in our past Hill Day, right, last March, we were able to discuss about infrastructure, and us as adults, when we would speak, yes, the legislators were listening, but when the children would speak and talk about crumbling infrastructure all around them, not being able to have fresh water, you know, to be able to drink in the water fountains, to have, you know, crumbling, like I said, physical structures crumbling around them. It's not just easy, here, put some paint on it and it's done. No, the actual building is coming down. They're in a dangerous situation, makes it dangerous for them, and they don't feel comfortable. And if they're worried for their safety, then obviously they're not going to learn very well because they're preoccupied with other thoughts. And so, like I said, it had a huge impact. It was probably more important for them to speak than it was for us as adults to speak.
And how do the kids know about these kind of opportunities available to them? Where it seems like the theme that I'm gathering right now is that you as leaders are aware of all the programs that are they're like the invisible structure underneath the PTA that allows for us to really do every child one voice. That's where like the purpose of the PTA. How do kids find out? How do parents find out about the programs?
Well, on the National PTA website, there's all kinds of resources that you can go to, and I'm looking for in the governance section is the person that's in charge of the youth committee, and then you'd be able to speak directly to the youth committee themselves and be able to get more information on what their current initiatives are.
Danielle, you mentioned earlier that you also had introduced your school to Reflections. So what was your sales pitch, and how did you even get started on that process? And does that help you to find the like-minded people when you present the program like that?
Oh, yes, for sure. I mean, that helps to identify those people who are passionate about those bridge type of connections between the classroom and the fun stuff. I mean, teachers are, they're very focused on the education, as they should be. And sometimes that can just get to be focused 100% on teaching what they need to teach. And sometimes we need to be able to instill some of that love of learning beyond just what you have to do, right? And that's what I love about the Reflections program, and what I found in our district with our cultural fair that had been existing from our PTA, and from our science fair that had been existing. You know, this was just the art side of it, and there's a whole framework. I mean, I love the fact that, you know, I had done it at my old school and ran it at my old school, and honestly I was like, it's easy. It's easy to do, because the tools are there and all of the materials are there, and you get an internal advocate within the building, as far as from the teachers, staff, to help facilitate, become your voice within the school to help recruit and support. And then it's about promotion, and then you have something more to offer these kids. So bringing that idea in, I was able to find people who had that same passion for the arts, who wanted something that wasn't a lot of, you know, to be frank, nobody wants to take on a lot of work, right? And this made it easier, because it's like, here's a checklist, and here's what you need to do, and here's how you do it. And then if you can follow a list, you can make it happen. And it really is not that overwhelming, because that framework is there. That's what I love about the Reflections program. Plus the fact that it's bigger than our school. We gave these kids an opportunity now to compete at a regional, at a state, at a national level, and be recognized throughout that. That is amazing. I mean, we've got kindergartners who have that opportunity. We've got sixth graders who have that opportunity. You know, you've got, it's about expanding their view of the world and their role within it. And I think the Reflections program is a great entree into that, especially at the elementary level.
Yeah. Matthew, you have some.
I also add that many local units may not know that if we give those awards, those reflection projects to our legislators, they actually put them down in the tunnel for the Senate and the House.
Oh, I didn't know that.
They're at the Hill.
That's cool. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it just opens their eyes to a bigger world. I mean, my kids, you know, everybody, probably your kids, the first time that they realize that you talk to their teachers, you know, parent-teacher conference, what? Their worlds collided. And, you know, I have my home world, I've got my school world. And I think that just opens up like, oh, there is more outside of those worlds that I can do. And this is an opportunity to give it to them. But as far as, you know, the people within the organization that we have, it showed how we could do more than just make school fun or do a party. It's, you know, extending that experience and love of learning. I think that I've got a great team and a great group of volunteers that want that same thing carried through. And it was a great vehicle for doing it.
So the other vehicles, we only mentioned Reflections and we mentioned the School of Excellence. What are the other programs that you think are also on par? As we wrap up our meetup today, can you guys just spitball? This is like a lightning round. And I'm going to start with Matt, then Darvel, then Danielle. Just any other programs that national or state has that you think could work likewise, like vehicles. There's programs that come with checklists that are straightforward, that could expand the world for the communities and serve as a bridge. I really like that image. So let's start with Matt.
I'm sorry.
So this is a lightning round, just so 1 or 2 words. Pick a program that we haven't mentioned. We have mentioned Reflections, and we've also mentioned the School of Excellence. What are the other programs that national and state have that would also serve as a good vehicle for this building bridges for the communities?
We've got the family reading experience.
And what's that?
I'm sorry?
Can you just say the family reading experience and what it is?
It's where we gather our families and our students and inspire reading together and working together in order to expand our reading. And we have the STEM in families, which is projects and other things in order to support the STEM, which is science, technology.
And then I'm going to have to leave some for Darvel.
Education, math. Okay.
Danielle, yeah, it's not fair.
No worries. I was just reading them off the site, but
yeah.
I talk a lot when I'm on a roll anyway, so I'll share the spotlight. But two things that have pointed out to me, just dealing with basically the spark that I'm dealing with is my son, who's at 19, very, very politically inclined. So I look at advocacy and legislation
Mhm.
as a good tool to throw out there to our high school youth, because let's face it, within the next 4 to 8 years, that's our future, you know. And diversity, equity, and inclusion. Um,
Yeah.
let's start the uncomfortable conversations. It has to be start. And
And how's
that's
that program? Does that program entail? Because that is those two things are popular. The advocacy we kind of touched on,
mhm.
but the diversity inclusion, how does that program look,
um,
and what can the school do?
well, for me, basically because of my position in my community, from the school to the village, um, being serving as a commissioner for the Human Relations Commission. This is something that we talk about pretty much every meeting. We touch on this every meeting. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is way past the black and the white. Let's just face it. In 2020, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it's past that. It's past that. And looking at my community, we're about as much of the best example of diversity and equity and inclusion in the village of Lansing that I could ever imagine. In 2005, me and my family was like maybe a small percentage of the 5 to 10% of blacks that lived in Lansing. In 2020, you're looking at 30% black, 20% Hispanic. Um, the other breakdown is between Indian American or Asian American. So our village is trying to push that agenda to whereas everything that's in our village, from PTA to school board to school village administration, represents each and every part and ethnic background that's based here in our village.
That's a
So
good goal.
to back to what I was saying about our youth are speaking more out about that, as
Yeah.
far as being, because they're wondering how are our lives going to be within the next 10 years without our involvement in diversity, equity, and inclusion. If we just sit back and be teenagers and we don't think about it, we're just going to spend our, mom and dad's money, go to college, get this degree, get a network engineering degree, and then we're off somewhere and not worried. Most of the bulk of the students that are here are trying to push that DEI agenda, and they're still here, you know.
Okay. And
Uh,
then PTA allows them to have a
and
platform to
PTA
actually practice
PTA
it.
would
Yeah, and find
PTA
it,
would be the
sit at the
perfect,
table.
exactly.
Correct.
They would be the perfect platform, especially if you're dealing with, if you're part of a local unit that has that's diverse,
Yeah.
from the local unit to the district to the state or whatever, our state board, to be a part of that organization that represents that in its platform is the best thing for a student to be involved and utilize that tool to have that voice to speak up for DEI.
That
And
sounds.
one of our goals was to get our students together this year. And this was our action plan for last year going into this school year. We were going to get a bus together, get a whole bunch of our students, and we were going to really show out for Advocacy Day down in Springfield this year. But
Well,
thanks to that,
next year
thanks to
there's a.
thanks to stinky COVID, that didn't happen. But yet, I'm still getting feedback from those students and their parents and other people, as far as people that I know from mix and mingle with the Human Relations
So,
Commission in our
so
community.
in other words, basically, if you are listening to the community needs and you're aligning them with the programs that the PTA has, it really creates some magic.
Exactly.
And I wanted to wrap it up tonight. We're right at our mark of 40 minutes with Danielle. You've mentioned reflections, and you've expanded it really well on the reflections and the School of Excellence. What's another program that you think would be good for your PTA?
Well, one of the things that we're not honestly tapping into the resources that are out there yet, but the PTA Connected Digital Life, it's what we need now. And we're doing it through our own avenues with the school and the district, and how we can address what's happening with our kids and their digital lives right now, especially the impact that this quarantine and COVID and the pandemic has put on them. I know personally, my kids have more freedom at a younger age because I'm letting them talk to their friends on devices where I wouldn't have done it at this age. But because I want to keep them isolated and safe from a, physical distance perspective, that's become our reality. And it propelled them into this experience that they're not ready for. And we're trying to keep a handle on it. And with the district, we're trying to figure out ways to address it and help our parents address those safety concerns. And even we've tapped into some of the speaking engagements that our high school has done. It's out of our district, but what they've brought in speakers to talk about this, to talk about what we've done at the local level. But I would love to explore more tools that the PTA at the national level has around this, because I think it could, again, help address with that finer point the reality of now, and how do we adapt from my kids having this freedom now that, now we've got a vaccine and hopefully next year we're in person in school, and we hit that point now. How do I dial it back from the freedom that they've had for the last almost year to introduce that balance and that safety and that awareness, and bridging what a real life relationship should be instead of a digital life relationship should be.
I actually have a positive point of view of this. I feel like it's like around Halloween time when you eat too much candy and then you don't want to eat candy for a while. I feel like that's what's going to happen to the kids. They're going to not want to be on screens. They're actually going to be eager to get out and
they certainly do have
together.
that.
Yeah.
It's like, not another Zoom meeting, Mom.
Exactly. They're all zoomed out. And actually, that's a perfect stopping point for us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for participating in this tonight. And have a great night, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alyssa, for moderating.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.